We are back with this 2.7 liter EcoBoost engine in this F150, and today we're going to talk about the differences between the first generation and the second generation of 2.7 liter engine, and whether or not the upgrades to the second gen are worth it. Welcome back to the channel, guys. This is a 2022 F150 with a 2.7 liter EcoBoost engine, aka the Nano. And we're continuing on our little mini series reviewing this engine. And today, like you heard, we're going to talk about the differences in the different generations of this engine. For starters, in 2015, this was obviously the first gen. This truck right here has what's called the second gen 2.7 liter EcoBoost, and that came out in 2018. In my opinion, there are a couple critical upgrades to this engine, as well as one or two upgrades that I personally don't like, and we'll get into it. Ford themselves claims that the upgrade was to increase internal friction or reduce internal friction in this engine, therefore being able to produce more power and more efficiency out of this engine. And that leads us into the first difference of the two generations is, well, the power outputs. The second gen engine puts out the same horsepower, 325, but this engine here puts out 400 pound-feet of torque, a nice round number, in comparison to the first gen that only put out 375 pound-feet of torque. So you get an extra 25 pound-feet of torque out of this engine, which you can't really complain about because more power is usually always a good thing. Another important update that has absolutely nothing to do with the engine but changes the characteristics of the engine completely is that in 2018 with the second gen 2.7 liter EcoBoost, the 10-speed automatic transmission now came standard, meaning that you're going to have increased acceleration, better towing, better fuel economy, because you just have more gears to choose from, putting your RPMs or your engine speed in a much more favorable position or power band, giving you much better engine characteristics without actually changing the engine at all. Now, the first major mechanical difference or upgrade in the second gen comes with the way this engine is fueled. The first gen engines were direct injection, but this engine right here in 2018, Ford introduced port injection alongside direct injection. This basically eliminates the carboning up issue when it comes to direct injection on the intake as well as the intake valves. Ford has implemented this on their 5 liter as well as their big brother 3.5 liter EcoBoost. I've talked about it at length with those engines. I really like that Ford has done that. Running direct injection on a forced induction engine, twin turbocharged engine like this engine, is actually highly advantageous because, well, with those very high cylinder pressures, direct injection is able to spray a very precise amount of fuel, and the timing of that spray is also extremely precise, so you get a very clean burn. The one downside, like I mentioned, is that the intake valve as well as the intake itself can start to get carbon deposits in there, which will eventually start to restrict airflow and then therefore restrict performance. If you have a first gen that does not have the port injection addition, I wouldn't panic by any means, but I would say is that when you get around 80, maybe 100,000 miles, you might want to start to look at maybe getting your intake cleaned out. And the only way to really do that is to get in there manually and clean it out with, well, I guess they usually use a walnut blasting technique to get that carbon off the intake. So that is the one downside with direct injection, but thankfully in 2018 Ford has pretty much cleared that problem out, and you just only get the benefits without the downside. So that is the first upgrade that I really like with this second gen engine. The second major mechanical upgrade with this second gen 2.7 liter that I like is that Ford changed up the timing chain situation. So originally the first gen came with a single timing chain. This engine, the second gen, comes with 2 timing chains, one for each bank realistically. This first gen didn't necessarily have complete timing chain failures, but it would get, I guess, a timing chain rattle. So I think Ford recognized that that was probably a weak point, and with their second gen, they addressed that issue. I like that because, well, a timing chain failure is usually a complete engine failure. If your timing chain goes, usually the engine goes with it, because then you get pistons hitting valves, and it's usually just not a good situation. Alongside the timing chains is brand new camshaft. So this is a dual overhead engine. It's got 2 banks, meaning that it has 4 camshafts. They went with lighter hollow camshafts up there. Ford claims that's going to be helping to lower the internal resistance or friction of the engine, therefore being able to output more power. Again, whether or not that really leads to tangible power output, I don't know. Another mechanical upgrade comes in the form of turbos. These turbos come with new lighter turbines, as well as turbines with sharper vanes on them. Ford claims this is allowing the turbos to maintain peak boost, 18, 19 PSI of boost for longer. The big thing, which I like, is that Ford went to fully electronic VGT actuators. This is just gonna really make throttle response that much more quicker. Those electric VGT actuators are gonna make a difference, and basically all the modern diesel engines run them. Now, myself as a mechanic, oil leaks really don't scare me all too much, unless it's literally flowing out of the block. But in terms of the average owner, I feel like oil leaks are a major concern, wouldn't want to get it on the driveway. And with the 2nd gen 2.7 liter EcoBoost, Ford has upgraded the oil pan as well as the oil pan gaskets. You guys may or may not have heard, that is one of the major issues with this engine, is oil pan gasket leaks. For whatever reason, whether it was the plastic oil pan design in the 1st gen 2.7 liters, they just could not get them to stop leaking oil, and well, it was a big problem and still is to this day. I'm pretty sure, what I've read anyways, is that 1st gen oil pans and oil pan gaskets are often on back order just because there's usually such a high demand for them. Good news is that the 2nd gen Ford went back to the drawing board. It's got a new oil pan as well as a brand new oil pan seal, which apparently does its job properly. So those are the upgrades that I like about this 2nd gen 2.7 liter. It's definitely not a complete revamp of this engine. It's just little tweaks. I think Ford recognizing maybe where there are weak points, like that timing chain, that direct injection carboning up issue, obviously the oil pan, and they just made changes to try and improve on an already, you know, successful engine platform, dare I say. One upgrade that I do not like comes in the form of a variable displacement oil pump that now comes with the 2nd gen 2.7 liter EcoBoost engines. Maybe I'm a little bit old school, but I just feel like trying to get more internal efficiency or less friction, as Ford calls it, your oil pump is the last place you want to try and rob some of that power from. I would like to have as much oil flow and as much oil pressure throughout my engine as possible at all times. Basically a variable displacement oil pump, it'll lower the flow of oil when you're at like idle or when your RPMs are lower, when the engine doesn't necessarily need all that oil flow or all that oil pressure. That's the gist behind it. The main reason why they do that is because it helps to extend oil life intervals, as well as saving some fuel economy. Although again, I don't know how tangible the fuel economy savings would be with the variable displacement oil pump, but the main reason is you can extend the oil life intervals. I personally, again, as a mechanic, I would have no issue doing an extra oil change a year to not have variable displacement oil pump, but they're in the business of selling trucks, and it seems like the manufacturers are all kind of competing with themselves who can have the highest oil life interval. That's just not a game that I like to play. I'm a good old 5,000 miles. That oil gets changed no matter what. So again, going down a rabbit hole there, but that's the one 2nd gen upgrade that I don't necessarily like to see, but it seems like all the manufacturers are going down that road anyways, so it is what it is. So those are the major mechanical upgrades between the 1st gen and the 2nd gen 2.7 liter EcoBoost that caught my eye, at least. I guess, is it worth it to go after the 2nd gen? I would say yes. I don't think, well, I already said, it's really not a complete generational change. I think Ford just basically tweaked some issues, some weak points on an already, you know, very strong platform. I think this engine is a wonderful platform to work off of, and seemingly Ford likes it because this upgrade's been out since 2018 and we are coming on to the 2024 model year, and well, I don't think they have any plan to change it anytime soon. I don't think there's anything wrong necessarily with going after the first gen. There just is a couple more things that you might run into: carboning up the intake, oil pan leaks, nothing catastrophic, but if you got the money, definitely the second gen is just a little bit more elevated than that first gen, and that's what you would expect to see. Anyways, guys, if you liked the video, don't forget to leave that thumbs up, and if you like cool stuff like this, don't forget to subscribe. I will be towing with this engine at some point in the new year, and I'm really excited about that, as well as talking about some issues or things I don't like about this engine. So that could be a little bit of a bumpy ride. So anyways, enough of me. We'll see you in the next freaking video.